Just picture getting turned down for every single one of your father's film auditions. That's the truth for Scott Eastwood. Despite Clint's instructions to American Sniper, Scott did not get the call. In order to make ends meet when his father was winning Academy Awards, Scott parked vehicles and mixed drinks. Acting was not as lucrative for him as bartending. He thought about becoming a firefighter at the age of 35 because Hollywood had so badly damaged him. His professional difficulties, however, are hardly the most startling aspect. When he finally confronted his father, that's what transpired. Scott Clinton Reeves was born on March 21, 1986, in Monterey, California. No news outlets reported his birth. His father didn't even publicly acknowledge it. Clint Eastwood, having directed and starred in successful films like Pale Rider, Clint was already well known at the time. But even as he walked the red carpet with pride, Scott's life was quietly starting in the background of a scandal. His mother was a flight attendant named Jocelyn Reeves. Midway through the 1980s, she had met Clint on one of his frequent excursions. The result was a covert relationship that lasted for at least 3 years, during which Clint kept up a public relationship with actress Sandra Locke. Locke didn't realize he was leading to lives. It wasn't until years later, during a terrible dispute, that she learned about Scott and his younger sister, Catherine, whom she had assumed were exclusive. Scott's birth certificate did not bear the Eastwood name at the time of his birth. His name was listed as Scott Clinton Reeves in a covert effort to hide the affair. 1988 saw the birth of Catherine. By then, the secret had spread far enough to make it impossible to keep the truth hidden indefinitely. However, Clint didn't publicly acknowledge them, and he didn't bring them up either. Scott grew up in the sleepy village of Carmel where Clint had previously held the position of mayor. The youngster who grew up there, however, did not lead a life of fame. In the 1990s, his father could have made $15 million a movie, but Scott's world was totally different. When he was 10 years old, Jocelyn relocated them to Hawaii. It wasn't merely a shift of location. The goal was to put Scott and the Eastwood spotlight thousands of miles apart. Scott lived there in modest circumstances, leading a life that his peers never questioned. They were unaware that his father was in Hollywood. Additionally, Clint mostly avoided being seen or reached. Scott survived on the pay of Jocelyn's flight attendant job while Clint amassed a fortune through new assets and highly successful movies. During his teenage years, he worked construction jobs. He worked as a waiter. There was no trust fund to assist him when he enrolled at Loyola Marymount University. He was self-sufficient despite pursuing a degree in communications. He continued to use his given name, Scott Reeves, while taking acting lessons and trying out for small roles. He didn't desire preferential treatment. He did not want Clint's assistance. Nevertheless, the rejection happened. It was then revealed by Scott that he tried out for almost all of his father's movies but was rejected each time. Clint wouldn't assist, even when directing American Sniper, a movie that had 6 Oscar nominations and a revenues of almost $547 million. He didn't give Scott any significant roles. Scott desired a single shot. He didn't understand. Clint had an easy philosophy. No favors or freebies. You have to earn it. Although it may sound commendable, Scott had to labor on low-budget movies, park vehicles, and build houses for years while his father received Academy Awards. Early on, his duties were hardly noticeable. In Clint's 2006 film Flags of Our Fathers, Scott played the minor part of Private Roberto Lunsford. Scott Reeves was the name credited to him. He was Clint's son, but no one knew it. That was his desire, but it came at a heavy price. He didn't see the headlines, the momentum, or the attention. In movies like Player 5150 and Pride, he was obscured by the credits. Not all of these were independent movies. A few went directly to the video. Others didn't perform outside of a few places. He was working hard but not making much progress, and he was locked in a professional limbo. His family's circumstances weren't any better. Clint Eastwood had 6 separate women and 8 children. Scott was only a single component of the puzzle. During Clint's marriage to Maggie Johnson, he had half-siblings, including Morgan, Francesca, born in 1993, with actress Frances Fisher, Kyle and Allison, Kimber, born in 1964, to a stunt woman, and Lori, born in 1954, and placed for adoption. Born to Dina Ruiz, a news anchor, in 1996, a few of these kids were raised in affluence. Some didn't, such as Scott and Catherine. It wasn't until maturity that some of them met. It was awkward to get together with family. Simmering beneath the surface was resentment. In Hoya as a teenager, Scott had difficulties. He did something out of character. His fighting earned him a suspension. He referred to his anger management problems afterward. Despite knowing who his father was, he was unable to discuss it. No way to find out why he wasn't there. He felt both significant and invisible, and he was unable to explain this to anyone. In 2000, he enrolled at Carmel High after they moved back to California. The truth slowly started to come to light. He was treated like king by certain students. Others made fun of him. He contemplated retaining the name Reeves indefinitely in order to avoid the parallels. He was no longer hidden by college. He still wouldn't, however, depend on Clint's strength. His application was for financial aid. He put in a lot of effort at work. He tried out for almost non-existent paying jobs. Then a change started to occur. Scott got a part in Invictus in 2009, although it was another Clint Eastwood movie. Scott went by his given last name this time. The movie was about proving yourself in a stressful situation. Fighting for attention was the goal. In fact, Scott was doing just that. Scott Eastwood made a big gamble at the age of 26. In addition to one horror movie, he secured a contract for 3. He would have been bound into a trilogy for his performance in Texas Chainsaw 3D, and no one even knew his true name. His name remained Scott Reeves. To stay away from being known as Clint Eastwood's son. In August 2011, the filming took place in Shreveport, Louisiana. Scott was not even present for the initial chainsaw atrocity in Texas. Even though he had just seen the Jessica Biel adaptation, he entered one of the most recognizable horror franchises yet. Proposed as a straight sequel to the 1974 original, the film became the 7th installment. Then a major turning point occurred. Scott joined Brad Pitt's grim World War II movie Fury in 2014, barely a year later. This was not only a small part, he portrayed the newest member of the tank crew, Sergeant Miles. The cast was awarded Best Ensemble by the National Board of Review, with Pitt, Shia LaBeouf, and John Bernthal now standing shoulder to shoulder with him. Eastwood was still attempting to demonstrate that he wasn't riding on a renowned last name. Official industry recognition was given. It wasn't only for showing up, either. Scott was required to undergo rigorous military training and drive authentic Sherman tanks from the 1940s. This was emotional, physical, and unfiltered labor, but it was worthwhile. Critics for the first time began referring to him as a legitimate actor, and not merely Clint's child. 2015 saw Scott make yet another unanticipated turn, this time into romance. In the Nicholas Sparks movie, The Longest Ride, he portrayed a bull rider who develops feelings for someone. It featured traditional sparks, gradual burning, intense feelings, and difficult decisions. This is what's crazy though. Scott performed his own bull riding antics. That occurred amid a year that was jam-packed with big-budget blockbusters and Marvel stars. Nevertheless, Scott took the lead. In fact, he received a nomination for Choice Movie Breakout Star. His image in the studios changed. Scott, surprised. Everyone won more right when they thought they understood him. He appeared in the music video for Taylor Swift's song Wildest Dreams later that year. In a mystical African film set in the 1950s, he played the main romantic interest, not simply a cameo. The video, which was directed by Joseph Kahn, was among Swift's most sultry and dramatic. Both the sultry scenes and the reaction were surprising. Industry people cautioned him against doing it. According to them, it might destroy his reputation as a serious actor. Nevertheless, Scott went for it. The video debuted on August 31, 2015, during the MTV VMAs pre-show. Millions of people viewed it in a matter of hours, and there was a twist to it. The conservation of wild animals benefited from all sales. Scott Eastwood, meanwhile, spent nearly 3 years hiding a devastating secret. In 2017, he eventually came clean in an interview with GQ Australia. Jewel Brangman, his lover, passed away in an automobile accident back in 2014. Her age was just 26. It wasn't serious, the kind of accident that most people ignore. Jewel didn't though. Scott never mentioned anything, but she passed away right away. Nor to her family, nor even to the public. Up until that one interview, he said nothing. Jewel was traveling from San Diego to Los Angeles in a rented 2001 Honda Civic. She caused a minor chain reaction collision with another car while traveling. It didn't appear to be lethal. There were no significant injuries to anyone else, but Jewel's automobile held a terrible secret. 2009 saw the recall of the airbag inside. The business that rented it never fixed it. The airbag did not save her when it deployed, it killed her. The chemicals therein were no longer stable. The canister of metal detonated. A shrapnel fragment tore through her neck. Scott said it shattered her back because it was so violent. That was the only wound. She was killed by a single flying metal fragment. Takata was the source of the airbag. In the United States, 24 million automobiles had their airbags. It grew to be the largest car recall in American history. That recall, however, came too late for Jewel. She was involved in the repercussions. Her dad, Alexander Brangman, was devastated. In order to spend more time with his daughter, he had relocated across the nation. He had only one child, her. She was his closest companion. She would always be his little girl, according to the last Father's Day card she handed him. She vanished after 3 months. Scott felt heartbroken. He claimed to have lost friends in the past, but never a loved one in that way. He had never experienced a partner's death. That altered him. It made dating harder, he added. It was more difficult to trust people. He kept it a secret from Jules' father for years. "I still haven't found the right words," he said in 2017. Jules' father had pleaded for explanations. Only the world knew how much he loved her. However, Scott said nothing, and it was obvious when he did speak. He wasn't cured. He remained in pieces. The accident was not the only source of Scott's suffering. It resulted from his actions. He never made contact or called. That guilt hung upon him. When he did open up, it was about more than simply sadness. Shame, survivor's guilt, anxiety, and emotional paralysis were all factors. He was at a loss for how to deal with a parent who had lost everything. Paul Walker, however, was another type of mentor to Scott Eastwood prior to all of that and the heartache. The Fast and Furious actor was more than simply a colleague. He was a big brother, a buddy, and a guide. Scott was also introduced to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which would eventually help him mentally survive. In 2007, Scott was introduced to the sport by Paul. It wasn't merely workout for Paul, it was an attitude. Renowned trainers including Ron Cherokee Miller, Frangina, and Ricardo trained him. He even created a training center out of portions of his house in Hawaii. That was his love for it. At the time of his death in 2013, Paul was already a brown belt. His goal was to obtain his black belt as quickly as possible. He didn't get there. However, his teachers gave it to him posthumously 2 weeks after his passing. Paul's gift was taken seriously by Scott. He wasn't a casual trainer. He took everything in stride. He claimed it taught him how to manage his ego, maintain his humility, and deal with both physical and mental anguish. He added that some people, regardless of who you are, will choke you out, while others will choke you out. That was the lesson. Not a celebrity, you couldn't be protected on the mat by having any muscles or a famous last name. Every inch has to be earned. This was crucial for Scott, who grew up under Clint Eastwood's influence. He required something that deconstructed assumptions. That's what jiu-jitsu did. It taught him to be mindful of his boundaries. It provided a secure area for him to fail. His identity was shaped by it. The power of jiu-jitsu for guys was once explained by Joe Rogan. He claimed that it provides individuals with a means of letting go of pent-up emotions, a method to quit acting, and a way to confront their anger and fear without resorting to violence. You become humbled by it. It soothes you. It did precisely that for Scott. Following Jules' passing, jiu-jitsu became more than just physical exercise. It turned into therapeutic. According to Scott, it kept him centered and motivated. He consistently showed up for practice. Even when he didn't want to, he gained power from that discipline, both mentally and physically. Paul Walker, in a peculiar sense, saved Scott Eastwood twice. Once by exposing him to the sport, and again by providing him with the means of survival. Despite Paul's tragic death, his influence endured. Scott had that with him. He honored his buddy each time he stepped on the mat. He honored Jules each time he stood back up. Not all Scott Eastwood wanted was to follow in his father's footsteps as an actor. He desired to make his own way. He joined one of the world's largest franchises, The Fast and the Furious, in 2017, and that route blasted wide. He portrayed Little Nobody, a shrewdly dressed government agent. Paul Walker's absence was intended to be filled by the role. He was not imitated by Eastwood. Instead, he contributed steel, humor, and appeal of his own. The character enjoyed fast vehicles, shared the same sense of honor, and quarreled with the crew just enough to gain their respect. With over $6 billion already made globally, the franchise immediately made Eastwood well known. It was more than a cameo either. His ability to handle huge action and large actors was demonstrated when he assisted in The Hunt for Cypher, the villain played by Charlize Theron. It was not an isolated incident, though. Eastwood expanded even further in 2018. He took up the enormous responsibilities of the original film by co-leading Pacific Rim Uprising. The film was filled with explosions, monsters, robots, and Eastwood. Despite not impressing reviewers, the movie made $291 million. What about Eastwood? Despite CGI green screens and physical stunts, he maintained his dignity. It served as a test of his ability to carry a worldwide hit. He didn't break either. In 2019, he made a change of direction. It was not a noisy or ostentatious outpost. It was intense, terribly honest, and unvarnished. Eastwood portrayed a soldier stranded in one of the war in Afghanistan's most perilous engagements. The fantasy was not one of heroes. It was emotional, dirty, and terrifying. The reviewers praised it. 93% of Rotten Tomatoes rated it. It felt real, veterans claimed. One reviewer even claimed that Eastwood's mumbled phrase, "No, not today," sounded just like a young Clint. This time he demonstrated more than just his fighting prowess. "I can act," he demonstrated. After being absent from F9, he made a triumphant comeback in 2023 in Fast X. Little Nobody stood up when Mr. Nobody left. Even with Vin Diesel, Jason Momoa, and Brie Larson in the cast, Eastwood managed to hold his own. By hinting at Eastwood's character being even more significant, the film set the stage for future stories. He remained current and achieved his greatest breakthrough to date in 2025 in a franchise that is always reinventing itself. Alarum was no ordinary action movie. The match lasted 95 minutes and featured Sylvester Stallone. The Lionsgate-released film, which was directed by Michael Polish, featured two former spies as they attempted to live in harmony. They are drawn back into the crisis by a plane disaster, an enigmatic hard drive, and a lethal pursuit. Stallone put in the effort. The fire was brought by Eastwood. Seeing them all together was like a masterclass. According to the director, Eastwood also matched Stallone move for move, not merely surviving the scene. It wasn't only a film. It seemed as though action legends were passing the mantle from one generation to the next. Eastwood was also building something else while the cameras were rolling. Manufactured here, established in 2019 alongside businessman Dane Chapin. This wasn't simply another line of celebrity apparel. The purpose was patriotic. According to Eastwood, American-made ought to retain its significance. They began with the fundamentals. U.S. factories produce boxers, socks, and t-shirts. Not inexpensive, not outsourced. Every thread is the result of real American hands. It's the diligent people all throughout the nation, he stated, which enable our brand. And he meant it. As a spokesperson, Eastwood was more than that. He and Chapin were actively involved in every shirt's fit. The concept was bold but straightforward. Make great everyday necessities and share the stories of the people who made them. Every product served as a symbol, demonstrating the continued existence of American manufacturing. It only needed someone to reaffirm its belief. In September 2019, the brand Soft made its debut. Although their website gave supporters access to early deals, things were difficult behind the scenes. Redesigning designs, improving materials, and locating suppliers who shared their vision were all necessary. Typically, the majority of these goods were produced elsewhere. Eastwood was committed to demonstrating that they could perform it more effectively at home. Following fashion trends was not the goal. Pride was at issue. Every product had more than just a label. It had a story. It demonstrated the potential of America if someone was prepared to take the chance. But clothes wasn't the only thing created here. It was a much larger picture. Their present line is only the beginning. According to Eastwood, they sought to diversify into new markets while maintaining American manufacturing. Centered on employee pride, they had no intention of selling goods. Their goal was to alter the way that consumers thought about purchasing them. It was a movement with genuine values behind it. Scott Eastwood's upbringing was anything but typical. Not when Clint Eastwood is your father. Not when everyone is aware of your last name before you do. When Scott was only 16 years old, their relationship reached its peak. He committed a grave error. After taking his sister, 14, to a party, he left her by herself. It didn't seem like much to him. Perhaps he simply wanted to go out with his friends and have a beer. However, Clint didn't hold back when he learned. In order to punch Scott in the face, he grabbed him and smashed him against the wall. It was not a class. No warning was given. The lesson was one of violence. Clint caught him around the throat and made one point clear. You never ever abandon your sister during a party. Scott will always remember that moment. Clint Eastwood was raised in an era when being a father required harsh love. Scott then stated that his father did not support modern, nonsense parenting. You performed a wrong thing in their home. You received punishment. That was how it operated. No handouts were provided. Clint didn't give the request for $8,000 to purchase a truck, much thought. No, he simply said, Scott had a job. He had a job. It was sufficient. He had to do the rest on his own. He did, too. He learned more from Clint than just survival skills. He taught him how to work hard, be punctual, and take life seriously. That's where his hustler mentality originated. According to Scott, he had to earn anything he desired. In 2022, Scott made one of the most important choices of his professional life. A 3-picture agreement was offered to him by Warner Brothers. Being a member of the Suicide Squad was part of it. Most performers dream of receiving an opportunity like that. Large sums of money and exposure. However, that did not sit well with Scott. The contract did not appeal to him. They don't want to give me actual money, and the next movie doesn't have a script. He informed his father. He wasn't pushed by Clint. He simply advised doing it if it felt good. Don't. If not, it was that. No pressure, no fancy words, just intuition. Scott left the deal after that. Something significant was displayed at that moment. Clint was not only a dad, he was a guide. He instilled in Scott the belief that respect and intuition, rather than celebrity or wealth, should guide one's career decisions. However, their bond went beyond simple teachings and disagreements. Stories were also the foundation of it. Clint is now 94 years old. One of the last surviving icons of classic Hollywood is him. Scott is aware of this. He attempts to get as many stories as possible from him. There are moments when they are crazy. Tales of vintage film sets or Frank Sinatra. Narratives that would go in well at a museum. Scott pays close attention when Clint shares because he doesn't tell them very often. He once told his father, and he meant it, that you wouldn't be here forever. Scott recalls his childhood days spent on the set of Space Cowboys. In the seat next to Clint, he recalls him piloting a helicopter across the California coast. Clint occasionally even gave him control of the controls. Such moments weren't only cool. They helped Scott see the true nature of his father, focused, unafraid, and in total control of his surroundings. Currently, Scott is creating his own universe. Regretting You, his upcoming big-budget movie, is based on a best-selling Colleen Hoover book. The movie is scheduled to open in theaters on October 24, 2025. The cast has been stacked. McKenna Grace, Allison Williams, and Dave Franco. It's an emotional story. A family is destroyed as decades worth of secrets are revealed in an automobile accident. Hoover is the executive producer. Scott is entering a world that might blow up if the movie is a hit, and he is aware of how strong the Hoover fan base is, but he is not going to stop there. He portrays Robeson in Stolen Girl, a man who assists in locating a kidnapped child who was sent to the Middle East. The story is based on Maureen Daba's real life. As the mother, Kate Beck plays it. Taking place in Italy, the film explores conflict zones, international betrayal, and unwavering parental love. It's gritty, painful, and incredibly genuine. He's playing Lucky Strike as well, a movie from World War II that takes place during the Battle of the Bulge. The Outpost's creator, Rod Lurie, is also the filmmaker. The narrative is intimate. It is based on an interview the author conducted with a combat veteran at the age of 16. One soldier's perspective tells the survival story, starring Aron Junu, Ella Staler, and Colin Hanks. This November, filming will begin in Bulgaria. Afterward, there is Wind River. The following section, the 2017 hit, has a sequel. Along with Jason Clarke and Martin Sensmeyer, Scott is part of a strong cast. On a Native American reserve, the narrative centers on a string of ritualistic killings. In order to assist the FBI, Scott portrays a fish and wildlife tracker. It's nighttime, it has layers. It delves deeply into issues of justice, tribal politics, and wilderness survival in America. The release is still uncertain, even though the filming is complete. According to a quote by Scott Eastwood, being employed in Hollywood is like being a circus performer. He wasn't kidding. He talked candidly in a 2022 interview on how the industry had repeatedly let him down. At that point, he was 35 years old and began doubting if it was worth staying for the long run. He answered, "I've been burned a few times. I don't know if I want to do this into my 40s. Those weren't just words. His early years were anything but glamorous. He lived in Los Angeles and San Diego, juggling jobs like construction work, bartending, and parking cars just to survive. He made about $30,000 to $40,000 a year. Shockingly, he earned more mixing drinks than he did acting. There were moments when he came close to quitting. He even considered becoming a firefighter. That wasn't just a passing thought. It was a real backup plan. The emotional toll of chasing roles, combined with the unpredictability of the business, weighed heavily on him. And now, with his late 30s approaching, he's thinking about more than just movies. He doesn't have a family yet, but he wants one. And he's deeply worried about what that life would look like, especially the idea of being away from his kids all the time, just to keep working in an unstable business. While Hollywood drained him, something unexpected kept him grounded. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He got into it because of his friend, Paul Walker. They met over a decade ago, and Walker introduced him to the sport around 6 to 8 years before his tragic passing. Paul was obsessed with it. He had mats in his home in Hawaii so he could train anytime. That influence stuck with Eastwood. He started training seriously, and it changed him. He talked about it on Joe Rogan's podcast, calling jiu-jitsu the ultimate humbling. In a place like Hollywood, where everyone's chasing status and validation, rolling on the mat reminded him that ego means nothing. You're gonna choke some people out. People are gonna choke you out, he said. It's simple, it's honest, and it breaks the illusion that you're special. That mindset, that calm, that reality check. He said it's why the best jiu-jitsu guys are the most grounded people he's ever met.